So in this video, I want to talk about imposter syndrome. Now, if you're not familiar with what that means, essentially, it's a feeling of perhaps being a fraud. If you put yourself out there, will you be exposed as a fraud? And it's a feeling that comes up with every entrepreneur I work with, most especially in this event I host. It's called Entrepreneurs Anonymous. It's a coming together of entrepreneurs every week to open up, to share what they're going through, perhaps the challenges they've been faced with. And then the others there share their solutions. It's really, really proactive, really helpful. And what was interesting is in the last meeting, imposter syndrome came up. And I thought perhaps it was something that, every second or every third person might connect with. In actual fact, every single person that was at that event connected with the idea of imposter syndrome and having felt those feelings at a certain time. So for me, off the back of that, I was like, great, that's something I want to share and I want to talk about in one of these videos. So the first thing is defining it, and we've done exactly that. It's a feeling of being fraudulent, a feeling of if you put yourself out there, will you be exposed as being a fraud or not knowing as much as you should? Now this comes up so much in business. The very first instance that you go forward into whatever new entrepreneurial pursuit it might be that you're going for, suddenly you find yourself going, oh God, am I the pro that I'm presenting myself as? And there's an interesting kind of comforting line that comes to me in this space. Oftentimes, people that know an awful lot about a given space, when you ask them, you're a scientist or you're a therapist, how does it feel to know so much? Oftentimes the reply I get is, well, it's interesting. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know enough. And that for me is something that I've taken huge strength with when it comes to connecting with people that perhaps have these feelings of imposter syndrome. Oftentimes you'll find the people with the most experience that really should be out there have those feelings of imposter syndrome. Why? Because the more they study the very subject that they're professional in, the more they realize there's so much more to know. And so actually oftentimes the ones with the most experience and the most opportunity within a space feel imposter syndrome, similarly speaking, the most. And then on the flip side of that, there's that idea of naivety is bliss, and sometimes people that don't know enough are overly cocky. And so actually, if you break that down and you separate them out, if you've dedicated your life or you've really studied in on a subject and you're feeling imposter syndrome, that's quite natural. Whereas on the flip side of it, perhaps somebody that doesn't know too much about a given space, well, again, ignorance is bliss. They don't know enough, so they throw themselves forward. And that happens a huge amount, where really good people hold themselves back through imposter syndrome and really bad people step in and steal the market in the time. So the very first thing, I suppose, off the back of that I'd be pushing to you is if you're feeling imposter syndrome, perhaps actually that's an inner compliment, noting that you do actually know a huge amount. And then on the second part of that is if you don't put yourself forward, somebody else is only going to take your place. And for me, I'd always be very, very encouraging that regardless of imposter syndrome being justified or not, oftentimes when you're trying to be too perfect up front or before you go live, you'll paralyze yourself. It's called paralysis through perfectionism. And so what I really touched into that subject on another video, and the kind of key point that I shared in that is that oftentimes it's the journey where you learn the most. So if you're trying to be perfect up front, I believe that that's a real impossibility, because it's only once you start that you start really learning and that you can really refine. So long story short, feelings of imposter syndrome, one, completely natural. And as I said, I was amazed at the event that I hosted. Everyone said they connected with those same feelings. So going back to the first point, they're completely natural. If you don't get over them, somebody's going to steal your space. And so my encouragement, as I said, will be to really push you to go forward. And then the last point is knowing that, to be fair, you're always learning and you'll learn the most once you get started. So don't let imposter syndrome hold you up and get in your way.